Excuse the mess here. But this is a video I've been wanting to make for a long time. I do not get any of the credit for it. Essentially, we put together a team called Heart of America FPV that competed at the Sebring drone race. We're very excited to be competing in the XDC Team Drone Race in Las Vegas in just a couple of weeks. We're gonna be representing Drone Space, which is essentially an indoor drone playground in Colorado. So if you've never heard of Drone Space, get on Facebook, be sure and like their page, and check those guys out because they're doing amazing stuff for our hobby. Anyway, when we got our heads together and decided we were going to compete in this team race, we knew that team racing was going to have a very specific challenges. One of those challenges was if you crash in a team race and your quad is broadcasting video, the next guy can't take off until you unplug that quad. That was something we definitely knew we had to solve. The other thing is we wanted to see what we could do to make our pit stops as fast as possible. I don't get any credit for this other than assembling a team of really brilliant people that all put our heads together, and Mondo, I think, is the one that really came up with the idea of trying to find an RC switch that will allow us to turn our VTX on and off on a switch. Now currently you can change the video channel of your VTX with smart audio or in the OSD, but to put your VTX in pit mode, you typically have to power cycle the quad, so that really doesn't help you out much. It worked well for our team. In the team race, I think our pit stops were literally 5 to 7 seconds faster than the next best team. The problem was there were only 5 pit stops in the 100-lap race. Let's say we saved 35 seconds because of our super fast pit stops. Well, we saved 35 seconds because of our fast pit stops, but the average team was 1 to 1.5 seconds faster than us per lap. And 1.5 seconds per lap over a 100-lap race is 150 seconds. Having fast pit stops isn't everything. Now coming into Vegas, we think our pit stop strategy and our VTX pit switch strategy is gonna be very beneficial because it's gonna be a highly technical course with nets, and the probability of getting stuck in a net, crashing into either a gate or someone else is gonna be much higher. And so having the pit switch will well equip us to be able to handle that in a sticky situation. So let's dive right in and figure out what this pit switch is. So I'm gonna have a link in the description to the pit switch. Feel free to head over to Amazon. It is an affiliate link, so if you click that, I will get paid. Yeah, there will be an affiliate link, and I'll also periodically flash up a image that Mondo made. All credit goes to Mondo, Armando, fastest dude in St. Louis, one of the most brilliant guys I've ever met in my life. Armando, you get all the credit, brother. So let's dive right in and see what it takes to get this switch working. Alright, so hold on just a second. I ran into some issues. So I was attempting to use the new Lumineer VTX with the MMCX connector because MMCX is boss, and I've really been trying to find a non-clone, as Trappy would say, version of a VTX that supports MMCX. And I thought this was going to be the one. I don't know if it's a good VTX or not. I never actually got a chance to use it, but it is incompatible with our Heart of America pit switch. So I had to go back to the drawing board a little bit. For demonstration purposes, I went ahead and wired up a Unify Pro 5-volt version, and I did that to simplify the build a little bit. So if you have a 5-volt VTX, if you look on here, the way I've got this wired up, I have 5 volts going to VCC, right here on the bottom right. Obviously I have my ground. I have my PWM signal coming from the flight controller to that pin. And then I've got my load is the VTX. I'm going out to the positive on the VTX and out to the negative on the VTX. So that wiring is super simple. Now to wire up the VTX like that, there's a couple things that we had to do on the back. So I had to jump these 2 pads, which says that the receiver side and the logic side are both sharing the logic side power, the 5 volts. And then I jumped these 2 pads, which says that our load is also sharing that same power supply, that 5 volts. So I had to jump those 2 pads and these 2 pads to make it work like this. Obviously only do this if you're planning to run your VTX on 5 volts. There are very few VTXs on Earth that run on 5 volts, so just make sure you know what you're doing. If you are are using another VTX, ones that we know are compatible, the Unify Pros, so obviously the 5-volt version or the HV version or the HV race, they are all compatible. They work well. They just don't have MMCX. And then I have used it with the Mach 2 VTX. We have ran into the same issue as I had with the Lumineer VTX with the Tramp VTX as well. And what essentially happens, to be honest, I can't quite wrap my head around what's going on, but what it seems like, the way this switch works to turn off the power is it's cutting the negative side of the load connection. So it's turning off the negative or the ground to shut off the power to the VTX. For whatever reason, with the Tramp and with this Lumineer VTX, when you shut it off, it finds a ground through the video cable on the VTX. So if I desolder the video cable going from the flight controller to the VTX, then it works fine. But for whatever reason, if the VTX is wired to video, which is kind of important, it finds some lower version of the voltage through that video wire as a ground of some kind. So kind of weird. Nonetheless, no matter how you set it up or what VTX you end up using it with, let's dive into what you got to do in beta flight to get it rocking and rolling. So we'll jump into beta flight here just so you guys can see that it is a fresh, from the beginning, fresh install of this switch and the software. I'm going to do a firmware flash and we'll jump right into this sucker. Erased, flashed, verified, and successful. This is a brand new flight controller now. Let's jump in here, go over to ports. I've got my Crossfire connected to UART1, select Serial RX. TBS Smart Audio is on UART3, save and reboot. And did you guys see that TBS RX is supposed to be announced in the morning? I just realized they had a picture of it on their Facebook page, even though they're trying to be all shifty about it. But that thing looks small, absolutely tiny, which is awesome because the current Crossfire RX isn't huge. It's just a really bad shape. All right, let's jump into this. I'll show you guys everything I do to get this set up. I reverse motor direction, D-shot 600 on this sucker, 3.5 on my idle power, 8K, because why not? I don't have a barometer. I'm going to call this Shames 6S 006S because it is actually my 6th quad, but it's also going to be running on 6S. Serial receiver, select Crossfire. I've already got the Crossfire receiver bound. Air mode on, anti-gravity on, dynamic filter on, and then this is very important to get this switch to work. You have to select server tilt. Now I don't know why, because to me server tilt means that you're going to use a server gimbal, but it will not work unless you select server tilt. Get that selected, save and reboot. Jump right back in. Jump into PID tuning. We'll see. I'm going to put in kind of my normal PIDs, my starting point PIDs, and we'll see if they're any good. Put in my rates. All right, filter settings. CT1, 1, 2. Why mess with the third one? All right, jump into the receiver. This is a big, I have to do TAER because I left the terrain as stock. RSSI is on 12. Easy peasy. Jump into modes. I like to arm on channel 1, aux 1. I do set up an angle and horizon. That's kind of like my oh crap switch. Let's see, flip over after crash. That is on aux 3. So on my radio, I have 4 auxes set up. I have my arm. I have my angle and horizon both on one switch. I got flip over after a crash on my aux 3. And if we jump down to servos, servo 0, I have set up to aux 4. So in the servos tab, servo 0, I'm going to control with aux 4. Now, so far, I haven't had to tweak any of these numbers, the 1500, 1000, or 2000. They just work. But if you ever had any issues, this might be a spot to where you need to set certain thresholds for your switch in case someone else comes out with a switch or whatever. And in doing that, if we go to motors, we can see that servo number 1, and this is kind of strange. So even though we selected servo 0, we're actually controlling servo 1. If I flip aux 4 on my radio, I'm controlling servo 1. That's what we just set up, is so that works that way. I won't talk about it, but I'm going to set my OSD super fast. Alright, OSD is set up. Now we'll jump into the CLI. In the CLI, what we need to do is some resource remapping. Now, I always thought from the reading I did that this PWM signal stuff should work on a motor pad 5 or motor pad 6. And really, it seems like on at least one of my other flight controllers, I was able to get this to work on one of the extra motor signal pads. But on this flight controller, I was not able to do that. And so what we need to do is we're going to remap LED strip 1. Now, for whatever reason, LED strip control pin always works for this, or I don't know if I can say always, but in our experience, it has been a good go-to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to free up that resource by typing resource LED underscore strip space 1 and type none. And it says resources freed. And then I'm going to go in and I'm going to do resource servo 1, and I'm going to assign it to that resource ID or whatever, and that is A01, as you can see right there to the right of LED strip. Actually, let's do this. So I'm going to cut that, and if I type resource again, it's going to show us that whole list, but as you can see now, the LED is gone because we freed that up. So it was right there, and now it's gone. So we know that that resource is freed. So I'm going to paste that code, resource servo 1 A01, hit enter, resource is set to A01. If I type resource again, then we got right up here, right underneath our motors, servo 1 is A01. So don't forget to save your CLI, kids. Hit enter, and it should be working. All right, so let's jump back over here to the bench. Unplug that just temporarily. I've got my VTX. I've got an antenna just in case I don't want to burn anything. My radio's right here. All right, so if I go into my menu here, you can see that this switch here is moving channel number 8, which just so happens to be aux number 4. So I'll let that hang out right there. I'm going to give all this jazz some power. And as you can see, my flight controller's powered, my RX is powered, but I have no lights on my Unify. So watch what happens when I flip the switch. So the VTX is powered up. I think it's kind of pointless to DVR anything because I don't even have a camera on this. If I power up my goggles here, what I'll do is I'm going to go into band scanner mode. As you can see, my VTX is currently broadcasting, and I'll just let that band scanner run. All right, so there you go. You can see my channel peak right there, and watch what happens when I turn this off. Instantly, it goes away. Completely flatlined, no signal. I'll turn it back on. Ta-da! No issues. In my goggles, I see the OSD and a black screen. So that's all good to go. I want to demonstrate one more thing that just kind of speaks to how this works. What I'm going to do is I'm going to unplug it. The switch is on. I'm going to leave the switch on. I'm going to unplug the flight controller, the VTX and everything. My goggle band scanner has flatlined, so we know everything is off. Watch what happens when I plug it back in. So even though the switch is on, the VTX stayed off. And the VTX stays off. If I flip the switch off, it's obviously still off. But watch what happens when I flip the switch on. Right back. There it is. So it's really nice. There's a safe start situation. You can always plug in your quadcopter without worrying about whether or not the VTX is going to accidentally come on. Like, it always starts off as off. So that's a quick overview. Obviously, the switches are a little finicky. I would like to see this incorporated into a flight controller. I'd like to see this incorporated into a VTX. Personally, I don't know why VTXs just aren't connected to a flight controller via a UART and completely controlled like this. There's no reason why a VTX couldn't be just shut off with software. So now one thing I want to talk about before we wrap up, I'll turn my VTX off so it doesn't get hot. One more thing to talk about before we wrap up, and that is, the practical use for this in a team race. What this does is it turns your VTX off. We can have one guy up and flying on a 3-member team race. The other 2 team members, we can take their quads, plug them in, and have them on the block ready to go. So if pilot 1 crashes, or if pilot 1 comes in for a pit, all he has to do is turn his VTX off, flip of a switch, and I mean, it is fast, super fast. All he's got to do is flip a switch to turn his off, next guy flips a switch to turn his on. We're using a Y cable, because why wouldn't you use a Y cable for your goggles? And you're off. Literally, when we were testing this, we had pit stops that were less than 2 seconds, which is just bananas. It works that way. Now, the downfall is like this upcoming Vegas race. It's in a netted enclosure. I know you guys that went to Nationals last year just had PTSD flashbacks of a net. And the net is a really big issue, but unfortunately, sometimes we have to be in obnoxious places for big races with big money to be happening because there's spectators there. So it's in a netted enclosure. It's a light tracks style course with 40 gates in a 200 by 90 foot area. So there's going to be a lot of quads going down. Now, here's the thing. If you're on Crossfire, like I am. Most of my quads I run on Crossfire. My Crossfire TX, it's in the back of my radio, it connects to all of my Crossfire quads. They are all on one model. And if I crash a quad, flip the switch off, and I try to get back up with my next quad because there's no retrieving quads in this race, and I turn my video switch back on, what's to say it's not going to turn the video switch back on both quads? Technically, it would. So that is a real issue. That's something that that makes it a little rough for, you know, a team race like this. But what we're going to be doing is our guys are not going to be using Crossfire. One of our guys might use one Crossfire quad as his main quad, but if it crashes, he's going to switch over to utilizing a FreeSky protocol, because in FreeSky, you can have each quad on its own model. You can independently bind to, I don't know, 8 or so, maybe even more. I don't know what the number is, but you can bind specifically to several different quads. And just by selecting a different model on your radio, you can bind up to a different quad. Other guys on our team, there's a guy with a Turnigy Evolution radio, apparently it does the same thing, and a Futaba radio, which also does the same thing. So that's something that is very, very important to understand. At the end of the day, in a team race, you got to be fast. So we're going to go out there, we're going to have the best pits, and we're going to be fast. So that is our game plan, and hopefully we can bring in a big win for the folks over at Drone Space. So be sure and check out Drone Space on Facebook. And with all that said, guys, I will put a link to these switches on Amazon down in the description. Feel free to use that link. I am an Amazon affiliate, so if you use that link, it's going to help me out. I'd appreciate it. If you buy one of those switches, Amazon will throw like 15 cents my way. But if you want to go buy new furniture for your house or something, that'd be cool too. I've been having people buy a lot of camera equipment lately, which is amazeballs, because I need some cash to come in to fuel this RC addiction of mine. But anyway, guys, thanks for checking this out. If you're in Vegas, in the area, be sure and check out the team race on March the 3rd, I believe. It's whatever the first Saturday of March is. It's going to be at Bolly's, right there on the strip. Huge deal. Amazing race. It's going to look incredible. All the quads are going to be LED decked out, and it's going to be a blast. So hopefully we'll see you then. Otherwise, guys, thanks for checking this out, and we'll catch you next time on Heart of America FPV. Later.